creeps. Andy here, and gather around. Anda's about to rage. Today I will be comparing the new movie Knock at the Cabin to the book it was based on, The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. These are some of my favorite videos to do, so I have a million of them. I'll leave a playlist down below in case you guys want to watch any of my other movieverse books. And then I also have some M. Night Shyamalan type videos. Specifically, I talked about the plot holes in his movie Old, and then I also compared the movie Old to the graphic novel it was based from called Sandcastle. So I'll leave those two videos linked down below as well. But today is gonna be an interesting day. So let's just talk about this movie and this book. I'm obviously going to be comparing plot points and themes and things like that, so if you don't want me to ruin the book or the movie for you, then skip out on this video. Come back after you've watched the movie, or if you don't care about the movie, if you read the book, then stay around and we'll talk about it. And I'd love to know your guys' opinions below as well. So first, let's talk about The Cabin at the End of the World. This is such a fantastic book. I reread it for the second time this year just to prepare myself to watch the movie so I could do a movieverse book on this. I love this book so much. I love Paul Tremblay. The books that I've read from him have just been like exactly what I enjoy reading. I think he's a fantastic writer, and I think that's evident in this book. So this book is about a couple, two men who have a child, and the three of them go and stay in a remote cabin for the summer. They get a knock on their door, and four strangers break in, tie them up, and tell them that they must willingly sacrifice one of them or else the world will end and humanity will be doomed. They tell them that the world will end and they will be the only ones alive long enough to see the destruction of everything, and then they too will perish. So that's kind of the basic plot. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book before I move on to the movie. Well, it's told from varying perspectives, so you get to hear Andrew and Eric, which are the two men, their sides. You also get to hear Wen, who's the young girl. And then you even, toward the end of the book, get the perspective of the people who have broken into the cabin as well. And so you kind of get a feel for everyone. There's also some past that's brought into the book as well, which I think it's written in present tense, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. It's written in present tense, but there are moments that go back in time, and I think that those are important because I think they're important for the characters and to know their history and to feel some emotion and family connection and things like that. You guys know me, I have said before that it's really hard for me to get into books that are written in present tense. This is a shining example of a book that is written in present tense that is engaging and interesting to read. Then really the only thing that I want to say is, so these four people break into the cabin. They tell them that they must sacrifice one of them or else the world will end. However, and this is what I love about Paul Tremblay, he really does read, at least in my interpretation of his books, he really does leave it up to the interpretation of the reader. So I think that you can read this book and kind of go either way on whether the world is ending or not. In fact, the first time I read it, I was like, it's definitely not. And the second time that I read it, I'm like, maybe it is. So even I read it two different ways, reading the book two different times. This is complicated by a lot of different things that happen throughout. One of them is that Eric becomes severely concussed, and he thinks that he sees something when one of these rituals is taking place. I'm gonna try not to give everything away in the book in case you're still here, but he sees something and he believes that it's like he feels it too, and he believes that it's some like light source, not human, that's there and present with him. And then he continues throughout the movie to feel that as well. So his concussion does play a huge role in how he thinks, I think, and like how his mind is processing things and the things that he sees and feels. Another thing that adds complexity to the story is everybody's doubt that Leonard is telling the truth. And if you pay close attention when you're reading it, it is very interesting that all three, I believe, of the characters, when Eric and Andrew at some point doubt Leonard. And so I think what that does is adds more suspicion for the audience because Leonard is the leader of the group. He's the one that kind of founded the group. He didn't, I guess, reach out to them and pull them all together because they each came of their own accord, I suppose. But he was the one that founded the chat or the message board in which they all congregated. And so it's interesting that if he's not telling the truth and if people believe other people in the room but not him, I think that that just adds a little bit more complexity to the situation. Another thing is that the news broadcasts of natural disasters, they give them a chance to make a sacrifice. If they refuse to make a sacrifice, then one big natural disaster comes, and Leonard kind of lays this out beforehand. But to be honest, it's kind of like traditional end of world type stuff. It's nothing that you haven't heard before. And so when he says like the waters will rise and then there's an earthquake in the ocean, it's like, yes, that's a crazy coincidence, or maybe it's not, because as Andrew does point out, some of these are not live feeds. Some of these are pre-programmed shows, and you can obviously see when something is being programmed. Leonard is very meticulous about checking his watch and the time throughout the show, so Andrew is very hesitant to believe that this isn't just all pre-planned by the 4 members that break into the house. More complexity is added with Eric's religion. I think that Eric has more openness to like kind of the unbelievable because of his religious background, whereas Andrew is very grounded in reality and very much so denies everything is taking place up to the very end. And just their 2 different perspectives are so interesting to read throughout the story. And then the last is the past of the characters. Andrew soon realizes that one of the people who broke into the house was somebody who attacked him in a bar like 20 years prior. And so nobody knows if that is the guy or not, because at this point he's not in the story and they don't have their IDs or wallets on them, so they can't know for sure, but it definitely puts more doubt into Andrew. It also is a pretty big turning point in the book too, where even the members start to kind of question everything because of what Andrew says. And so there you have the book. Up until the very end, you're not really given an answer. It's really open for interpretation, which is why I love the book, which is why I love Paul Tremblay. And that's what I love about literature. It's obviously subjective. So now let's talk about the movie. Okay. So going into the movie, the only thing that I cared about was, I was like, if he definitively says, yes, the world is ending, or no, the world is not ending, he will ruin the movie. And I'm like, I just know he's gonna do it. I just know he is. And he definitely does that. He makes that decision for you. And I don't think that it's a good decision to be made. Now, obviously, it's his movie. He can do whatever he wants. These are just my opinions. But there are some things that I want to talk about in relation to the film that I think maybe other people will agree with me on, especially people who love the book. So let me just talk real quick about the things that I liked about the movie. I thought that the introduction, like the credits rolling, was brilliant. I think that he paid close attention reading the book. I think it was written by actually multiple people, not just M. Night, but I think 1 or 2 other people I saw wrote the screenplay as well. So I think they paid really close attention reading the book, and there were some really cool little things in there that I thought maybe you would have missed had you not read the book. And one of them was the initial credits rolling. They were rolling over pictures that were drawn, like end of world type pictures that were drawn on like a menu at a restaurant or nursing documents or whatever. And so these were to relate to the characters in the story. I thought that was a really genius way to kind of get the ball rolling. I also really liked how close they paid attention to certain things. There were little things throughout the movie. At one point, I think it's Andrew, but it could have been Eric, I don't really know which one it was in the book, but they're struggling because they're tied up on a chair, and he's struggling so hard, and he's like leaning back and trying to get out of the chair and struggling, and one of the women just places a hand on his shoulder and his chair falls flat, and he just goes like, man, I've been working so hard to try to get out of this, and all it takes is this petite woman to put a hand on my shoulder, and all of a sudden I can't move. And it really shows the power dynamic of the situation, and that scene was in the movie. And so I thought that they paid close attention to the book in that sense. Some of the dialogue was used from the book, which I thought was great, and a lot of the scenes were used up until a certain point, and then they weren't, and the book was kind of disregarded, and M. Night just figured, oh, I'll just do something else on my own, which does sometimes happen with movies. But if you have a book that's so good, I just don't, I guess, really understand why you would do that. I wanted to jump in really quick because I forgot to say that I really liked the characters in the movie, and I hated Redmond in the book. He's just kind of an asshole, but I loved him in the movie because I hated him so much. He was a dick in the book, but in the movie he was just filled with rage. I wish that he had stayed in longer. I think he was my favorite character in the movie as well. I thought he did such a fantastic job, but I also liked all of the characters. I thought the little girl actor was great, and I also thought that, what's his name? John Batista? Dave Batista? The Leonard. I also thought that he was a really good choice too. In the book, he's like 24, and so I thought it was weird that they selected him to be Leonard, but then after watching the movie, I feel like he added a lot of complexity to the character, because in the book, he's just a kid, he's 24, and so I don't know how realistic it would be for him to contain his anger at such an intense, you know, decision to be made to save the world or not, that he truly believed in. And so I feel like that the character of Leonard in the movie, him being a little bit older, regardless of whichever route you believe, if he was manipulating the people or if he truly believed what was going on or what have you, I think that he did a great job of like containing his anger and trying really hard to like be overly nice to the people. And yeah, I think the characters were great. That was something that I forgot to add that I liked in the movie. Okay, back to the video. Yeah, there were definitely good things about the movie. I knew that it was going to be a challenging movie to do. It's a horror movie that it takes place solely in the daytime, and so yeah, that's obviously a challenging thing. You don't have really, you do have like a building of anticipation, but you don't have mystery or this or that like you do in a typical horror movie. And really the only thing that the book has that I thought might kind of balance that out in the movie is it's pretty gory, and all of the gore was not shown. Like nothing was shown. But man, they should have shown that, because that's what made this movie a horror movie. And without that, you were kind of left with some anticipation, but also it felt a bit anticlimactic to me personally. And the last thing that I want to say is that when I was reading the book the second time, I tried to pay really close attention to the religious themes in it. And I was able to pick up a little bit more on it, but I really don't know anything about religion or anything in that realm. And so I did not pick up that the 4 people that came to the cabin were supposed to be the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. This is stated in the movie, and I loved that. I loved that I was able to learn more about the book through seeing the movie. Now let's get to some stuff that I didn't like about the film. So basically what I told you about the complexities in the book earlier, I said that for a reason, because I wanted to kind of bring those things back up. Basically what I'm trying to tell you is that anything that was there to add complexity to the story, to be left to the interpretation of the reader, was completely wiped out. Here's a huge example. The grasshoppers. The book and the movie both start with Wen catching grasshoppers in a glass jar. Leonard, who is the leader of the people who break into the cabin, he comes up, he helps her catch the grasshoppers, and he kind of freaks her out when she sees other people coming, and she runs in the house and they lock the door. Now, the grasshoppers, I mean, could be there for a variety of reasons, right? As with the whole book, it's kind of left for the interpretation of the reader. I think that they could be there to indicate maybe some foreshadowing, potentially the family being trapped and stuck in a place and forced to do what other people are telling them that they have to do. It could maybe have some religious connotations as well. I think there's something with like locusts, a plague of locusts coming down. Now, in the book, it is very important that nobody knows what happens to the grasshoppers. I mean, it is stated quite a few times in the story that nobody knows. Leonard tries to calm one down and say, don't worry, I let the grasshoppers out. But nobody knows for sure if they can trust Leonard. And so the grasshoppers being out there, either free or not free, is always in the back of your mind throughout the story. And that is such an important part of not knowing what happens. And in the movie, you just get the grasshoppers are still in the jar. If you know that, then you know, in the book at least, that Leonard has been lying, that you can't believe in this and that. And for me, just the close-up on the grasshoppers stuck in the jar was just like, why? Why would you? I just don't understand why you would do that. And the grasshoppers just weren't a main focus like they were in the book. except in the opening scene. And if you show them in the glass jar that they're just kind of stuck in there, I don't really know what that says. I just don't, I guess I don't understand what purpose the grasshoppers serve in the movie as opposed to what they obviously serve in the book. And there were things like this throughout. For example, Andrew goes to the guy, finds his wallet, and finds out, oh, this was the guy that attacked me in the bar. In the book, we don't know. We don't know either way. I guess I just don't understand the reason behind changing everything in the book if it already works so well. And here's what kind of confuses me about M. Night. There were two specific things where I was just like, why would you change that? That doesn't even make sense. One of them being the title. It is the cabin at the end of the world. It is literally a cabin at the end of the world. These people will be the last people alive if they choose not to sacrifice one of them, if it is true. It is literally the cabin at the end of the world. And so I don't understand why you would change the title to Knock at the Cabin. Now, obviously, I'm not blaming this on M. Night. I have no idea who makes decisions in changing the film titles versus the books, or I don't know. But I just don't understand how Knock at the Cabin makes sense to the movie. This title just makes so much more sense and is so prevalent to the themes that I just don't understand why you would change that. And then the second thing that I wanted to point out was at one point there is a live news feed about an earthquake that has struck. They say that a tsunami of up to 80 feet, a big wave, a giant tidal wave, is coming to hit the coast, the west coast. And so they're sitting there for a second and then the lady goes, oh, we just got this in. So you're like, okay, clip was sent in. Now in the book, they show very far away from the shore and someone's filming and the people are little tiny ants. And then you see this huge wave take them over. And that makes sense, okay? So now we are to believe that the news got in a video from someone standing right by that tidal wave. Now, the only way this makes sense, the only possible way this makes sense is that if somebody were at the beach and live streaming, which could potentially happen because when before tidal waves crash, the ocean obviously recedes. So somebody could be like, oh, this is weird, I'm gonna live stream this. Okay, that's fine. It's not mentioned that it is, and it does seem like that it was just a video sent in, but let's just give him the benefit of the doubt, okay? The only way this possibly makes sense is if someone were live streaming it, someone recorded the live stream and then sent it in the news. Fine, whatever. I will suspend my disbelief enough to give him that grace. But then the tidal wave hits the person with the phone and the phone's still recording. You're telling me a tidal wave over 50 feet tall will crash onto a phone and the phone will just be recording the wave and you could see everything clearly? It's things like this in movies where I'm just like, I don't understand. I mean, M. Night is one of the biggest directors of my generation, definitely. And I just don't understand how this movie, people don't watch it before it is released and they're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. And there was stuff like that in the movie Old where I'm just like, but how is this not caught? I guess that's my point, is why would you take something that works from the book and then change it to not work for the movie? So I don't know, let me know if I'm thinking too much into that or if you guys agree with me. The issue I had with it was mainly the last portion where it completely deviated from the novel and did its own thing. It definitely told you for sure what was happening. All of the characters from that point forward die in different ways or not at all, or this person dies and that person doesn't. It's all changed, which again is fine, and sometimes movies differ from the books, but I just don't understand why it was changed so much. I mean, this whole book, regardless of whether it's true or not, like even take out the apocalypse from it, it's still a tragic story and it still has so much feeling and emotion and horror behind it. And the movie just didn't give you that. And it focused so heavily on the apocalypse that nothing else really mattered. So my overall rating of the movie, it was fine. It was okay. It's definitely not a movie that I would go back and revisit very often. This book is, however. I love this book so much. I guess what I'm trying to say is if you watch the movie, if you want to watch the movie, if it looks intriguing for you, even if you hate the movie, if you're not... Sorry, my camera cut off. But I was just saying that I highly recommend reading the book. I think it gets better each time you read it, and I really like it. I love Paul Tremblay, and I hope that you guys will give it a chance and let me know how you feel. Do you agree with me about the movie? Do you disagree with me? Let me know. Otherwise, I will see you soon with another horror video. Bye, guys!